Started. All right, so hello and welcome to Concurrent Session 1C, Local Government. My name is Eric Walcott. I'm a Government and Public Policy Specialist with Michigan State University Extension, and I'll be facilitating this afternoon's session. I'm really glad you're all here with us. I think we've got three fantastic presentations today. I know I'm very interested to hear what each of them has to say, as local government is the primary area that I work in. I'm going to go through a couple quick items as an introduction and then turn it over to our first presenter. So first, real quick introductions for our speakers. We've got Ellie Wheeler from the University of Arkansas, who's going to present on building capacity to engage with county officials. Peter Wolfhurst from Penn State is going to present Toss Your Hat in the Ring. And Ramona Madising Hector from University of Florida is going to present Rethinking Community Development, a Grassroots Approach. I'll let them each introduce themselves further when we get to their presentation. A couple quick notes before we get to the presentations. These sessions are being recorded and will be posted on the website. Make sure if you're not presenting, keep your mic muted. That way we avoid any background noise and just keeps things running smooth. Each of the presentations will have about 20 minutes, including time for Q&A, and I will do my best to keep us on schedule. Again, during the Q&A, you can unmute and turn on your video if you've got questions for the presenters. You also can use the chat for questions. So if you want to, put those in during the presentation, and I'll leave it up to each presenter. If you want me to monitor the chat for questions and ask them during the presentation, I can do that. Or if you want to save questions for the end, that's fine as well. Obviously, since we're not all together in person, hopefully any refreshments are available in your kitchen nearby, and restrooms also hopefully nearby. One cool listening tip, actually, and this one was new to me when Brian Raisin shared it with us, was having some sort of object, a pen, a pencil, a cup in your hand when listening to presentations on Zoom is really helpful for focusing. It prevents you from multitasking, from taking your attention away from the presentation. So that's just, one good listening tip. And before we jump in, I do just want to, put this up here and say thank you to all the NACDEP 2020 sponsors that, enable this conference to go on. And with that, I'm going to stop my screen share and turn it over to Ellie Wheeler for our first presentation.
Great, thanks so much. Let me see if I can get my screen share up. Okay, and I'll start. Here we go. Okay, so thanks for the introduction. This is a presentation about how to build capacity to engage with county officials, and we used a local government finance program. And the main goal of this presentation is just to answer the question, should you duplicate efforts like this in your state? And we'll come back to this slide at the end when we discuss. But there are some big general pros and cons that you could think about if this would make sense for you to try and tackle in your area. A green light would be there is a need for fiscal stress analysis. And of course, that is not going away anytime soon for many counties across the nation. A yellow light would be just the fact that administrative support may vary and the quality and consistency of state data may vary too. And that was a little bit of a stumbling block for us. And then, of course, as always, the time and capacity that agents have to spend on something like this may be at a premium. So go on to the next one. This is kind of a fun screen grab of some interviews that were done in Arkansas, just asking regular people about their understanding of county government. We asked them questions, and as you can imagine, the answers were varied. County government services are often misunderstood or underestimated despite their important role in the community. And many county officials, too, didn't understand their responsibilities and didn't have, the information that they needed to make good decisions. So, public education wasn't the primary reason for creating our local county government finance program, but this does just illustrate the opportunities that we have to build our reputation as experts on local county government. So the primary reason for this program was that the University of Arkansas Community Professional and Economic Development team was asked to work with counties that were in fiscal distress in the early 2000s. So our short-term goal at that time was to respond to that immediate county fiscal distress. And we identified options for continued provision of high priority non-mandated services because during that time in the early 2000s, some rural Arkansas counties were in fiscal distress and threatened to reduce or eliminate funding for some non-mandatory services, including extension services and programs. Because of a request from U of A administrators, we developed resources and educational programs for county agents and county officials to identify opportunities to maintain funding for high priority non-mandated services in the context of a declining local tax base. So this program has continued, and the long-term goal for the program was to develop capacity within the cooperative extension service to provide resources and support to county officials wanting to provide services but facing fiscal constraints. So we wanted to become that go-to resource for county officials wanting to provide services. And of course, many county governments are still under fiscal stress, which affects their ability to provide these services and infrastructure needs. Okay. So what were our major strategies to do this? We wanted to build that knowledge base for county agents. Of course, it helped that originally they were required to attend these trainings. That definitely helped get things rolling. But we wanted to make sure that they had that basic foundation of understanding of county government functions, the types of fiscal constraints facing their counties, and we wanted to give them the resources to share with their local county government officials. We also wanted to promote UAX as an information partner that can provide important resources from our unique data set, which I'll go into here in a little bit, of county revenues and expenditures over time. And finally, when I wanted to get the biggest bang for our buck and make multiple learning opportunities available, including online learning, so that we could have the greatest reach. So I like to think of our strategy as kind of being a combination of a library and a classroom. So on the left, we have a library, and that is our county government finance database. That's a unique data set that holds historic local county revenue and expenditure data going back to 1999. So it's a really rich resource and database. This database contributes to the publications and PowerPoints that we have, including a PowerPoint on the fiscal status for each of the 75 counties. So all counties in Arkansas have a unique PowerPoint that explains the history of county revenues and expenditures going all the way back to 1999. We also, in addition to that, have kind of a classroom strategy to get that information out there. Of course, a library isn't any good if no one ever checks out any books, so we want to make sure that we have trainings in person and online to get those resources out. And those trainings focus on the roles and responsibilities of county government, the budgeting process, critical issues, county government finance, and options for providing services. Here are just a few examples of the publications that we have created that draw from that library of county government finance data. There we have property tax publications for all 75 counties, and for each county, these property tax publications provide information on the estimated share of property tax revenue by taxing unit, the per capita property tax assessments, average total property tax millage, and national comparisons for context. We also have revenue trends, and these publications are part of a series that cover revenue, expenditures, property tax, sales tax, and intergovernmental revenue for all counties in Arkansas, which utilizes nearly all of that big library of data that we put together. And it shows data over time by spending category, by geographic area, by economic dependence, and based on rural or urban areas within Arkansas. The data is by year of per capita expenditures and revenues by category, and accounts for income and population too. And there's data on the percent change over time of revenues and expenditures for all counties. Finally, we have revenue and expenditure PowerPoints, as I mentioned, for all 75 counties. And I have an example, just one slide from one of those PowerPoints on the next one. This is just one example of a slide pulled from the PowerPoints. And again, these are unique to all the counties, and they're pretty extensive, showing the trends over time of revenues and expenditures for all of those counties. So you wanted to look at the history of revenues and expenditures in your specific area in Arkansas, you'd be able to find that in those unique PowerPoints. So this has been really helpful for county agents and local government officials, but of course we did run into some roadblocks along the way that we'd like to share with you. Some major roadblocks to this project have been simply the time and resources required to develop the materials and the time and resources required to support agents with limited training and expertise in local government fiscal issues. For county agents and their projects to be successful, they require a foundational understanding of county government responsibilities and operations, including the budgeting process. It's important that they also understand the critical issues facing county governments as an understanding of the fiscal situation and options for providing services. Another issue has been that sometimes tricky local politics that can interfere with how information is delivered and received. We'd also like to share some lessons learned. The first one is don't underestimate the resources required to administer. This reminds me of building IKEA furniture. It always takes a little bit longer and is a little more complicated than you give it credit for at the beginning. So definitely keep in mind that this is a pretty big undertaking, and it would not be good to underestimate what's required, the time and energy to put into this. And also, it's not something that you can set it and forget it. There's a need to continuously market to the Arkansas Association of Counties and county agents simply because of the turnover within those groups. And so it's definitely an ongoing process. Okay. So our next steps, this is what we're thinking to continue this project. Because of the current COVID-19 pandemic, county governments, unless provided with federal funds, face some extremely difficult fiscal issues that cannot easily be resolved. Therefore, we will need to evaluate the extent of the fiscal damage and reassess counties' options to provide for needed infrastructure and services. Then identify options for counties to come back from the pandemic. We also want to attempt to get greater buy-in from the Arkansas Association of Counties to help disseminate our resources to local officials. We recently conducted a 2-evening training for county officials and JPs, which we would like to expand both in person and online to build on that. And we want to promote our online training for the public and local government officials, which will include an interactive dashboard in Tableau so that people can have access to that library of information on more of a real-time and interactive, in a more real-time and interactive context. Now is the fun part, the discussion. We'd really love to hear from all of you on what you think about this idea, if it applies to your area. What's your advice for strengthening this program? Would you duplicate any of these areas? And how will you be assisting counties to respond to and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic? I'm going to see if I can see the chat. Thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat so far, but feel free to jump in or unmute or chat, and I will try to answer some of your questions. I also wanted to let you know that I have links to all of the resources that I mentioned on the final page of this slideshow. So you should be able to, here we go. So I think if they're sharing these slides and you're interested in looking at these products more in depth, you can find everything on the last page of this PowerPoint deck.
Ellie?
So Ellie, I do have a question.
Okay, I'll go after Nozella. Thank you.
Sorry. First, do you have faculty that's just dedicated to this project? I know you said that was a challenge. Do you have faculty that was just dedicated? And then secondly, how did you get started gathering the data? So did you start from scratch? Did you have another resource that you began with and built upon that? But just recommendations for getting started.
Okay, thanks. Well, I work on this project with Wayne Miller, and he's faculty. I'm relatively new, so I don't know exactly how we built off that. Maybe Wayne, if you want to jump in and talk about how it all started in the early 2000s.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, one thing I want to emphasize too is that we had our administration support from the very beginning. In fact, they're the ones that wanted us to go in and work with some counties that didn't have funding to fund some of the non-mandated services, you know, as Ellie was talking about. And one of the, of course, non-mandated services provide funding for county programs is our extension program. And so you can see why they were concerned as well. But when we went into the first county, some of the tricky politics are we have a county judge, and then we have justice of peace, which are kind of the county commissioners or the representatives. And the county judge is kind of the CEO of the county. And this one particular county, the county judge was controlling everything. And the JPs knew almost nothing about what their responsibilities were or what was happening to their financial resources, where they were being spent. And so we working with them, and we thought it'd be a good idea to help them put together some information, a database kind of thing, to see, you know, where they've come from, what the resources were, and what the trends were for future, and so they could begin setting some budget priorities. So, yeah, we didn't develop a database from scratch. We used the legislative audit reports that's done in every county government annually. And these are put up on the State of Arkansas website. And so we would download these PDF forms, kind of translate them into Excel spreadsheets so we could use them that way. However, you know, counties are supposed to report in a standard format. This was not true. This was not true across time or among counties. And so it took an extraordinary amount of time trying to track down exactly, you know, where some of these revenues expenditures fit into different categories. And so we would actually have to call some of the counties themselves to get correct information to build this database. It's getting better over time, but it still takes a little bit of time to ensure that the information we have is accurate and reliable.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Wayne. I hope, did that answer your question?
Thanks, yes, that was good. I appreciate that.
Great. And I think we had someone else who wanted to chime in.
Ellie, this is Ramona. So I noticed in one of the slides you mentioned that this was required training. In the beginning, it was instituted as required training. And I wonder, as time has gone, if it's no longer required. And I think I saw somewhere you said capacity, and people are taking time away from their office. You know, you have to spend time in a classroom and you're moving it online. Have you seen your registration kind of go up and down? Because that's one of the challenges with extension offering programs in our counties, is if it's not mandatory or required or included in some sort of HR catalog or built into something already existing and aligned with the county, it's challenging for us to continue, not only getting in the door, but then also continuing that momentum. So I wondered if you had any insights on that with this particular program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was required in the beginning by our administrators for their county staff chairs to participate in the training, which was very helpful as well. It's not mandatory now, but we have the support of our district directors, and of course the county faculty relate directly to the district directors. And so they strongly encourage a lot of their, especially the new staff chairs in the counties, to undertake this training. And you asked a question before about dedicated staff. Well, there's no one dedicated just to this program. We have multiple hats that we wear. And that's one of the, maybe the drawbacks of trying to do this and many other things at the same time.
See a couple questions in the chat. First from Nody Lansford. What specific thoughts do you have about helping counties recover from the COVID-19 pandemic as you kind of look towards that next piece that you mentioned?
Yeah, well, you know, this is new, and I'm sure you have ideas as well what we can do. But there's going to be a limit to what can be done in a lot of our counties if they don't get some kind of federal assistance. I mean, even right now, they were putting off investing in basic infrastructure they need, you know, to provide the services for residents. I mean, broadband is one obvious issue too. And if they don't get additional funds, you know, what are their options? Well, one of the options that we've been promoting even now is our interlocal agreements. And so they begin to share the cost of services that's being provided. And so that may be one way to reduce cost. And, you know, if there's not a lot more funding, we may see a lot of mergers between counties, or maybe a lot of more interlocal agreements, sharing the cost of services.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to hear from you too. What do you think counties can do?
Yeah.
Well, I just shared, there was another comment, and then we'll go back to it. There was another earlier question, but Gary had commented saying, you know, property taxes and sales taxes run a lot of county government, and fiscal stress is an issue. Are there targeted short educational pieces that could help guide decision making? I posted in the chat, so I'm part of a collaboration in Michigan with University of Michigan and a couple other organizations and universities that's put together kind of a fiscal strategy resource guide. They're all, you know, two or three page kind of guides around making specific decisions related to budgeting coming out of during and coming out of the COVID pandemic. I saw there was a question too from Julianne. She says, I'm curious if you'll be offering dialogues about the content. I don't know, Julianne, if you want to unmute and maybe expand on what you mean by that. Oh, she said Ellie already answered the question. All right. So any other questions?
I'll ask a quick question. Well, I guess the question is, can we collaborate a little bit? I know I've known Wayne for a long time. Ellie, it's nice to virtually meet you. We're doing some similar things here, and I'll have a piece posted on our website soon that talks about the impacts of the COVID-19 on local governments. But it's mostly what has already been said. What is it? The impact on property tax was the impact which would be larger on sales tax. And we're seeing some of that data come in now. And we've got some indications that the state is going to be doling out some of the state funds from Washington to counties. But it's not clear exactly what that process is. So Wayne and Ellie, I hope y'all get some of that from your state government passed down to the counties there.
Yeah, we've been waiting. Well, yeah, I'm not optimistic if counties will get a lot of money from the state kind of thing. But yeah, in Arkansas too, you know, counties are heavily dependent on the sales tax. And of course, that's one of the revenue sources that's hardest hit immediately by COVID-19. And so we'll be trying to track that exactly how it's going to affect the counties.
All right, I think we've got time for like one more question if someone's got a lingering question out there. If not, Ellie, did you have anything else?
I think that was it for me.
All right, well, thank you so much, and we can all give our round of applause from our homes. Thank you so much for that presentation. Up next, we've got Peter Wolfhurst from Penn State. And Peter, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we can keep moving on.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, let me just make it a slideshow. Okay. Okay, well, appreciate the opportunity to present this afternoon or this morning, depending where you're located. My name is Peter Wolfhorst. I'm a community development extension educator at Penn State, and just like Eric, and others on today's webinar, I work with local governments. Also, John Turak, who was supposed to be part of the longer presentation if we met face-to-face, also works with me. So I'm here to talk about a program that was developed several years ago through Penn State Extension. In fact, it was developed by a county-based educator like myself, told toss your hat in the ring, getting involved in local government. I just want to promote our website here, which was redesigned a few years ago through Penn State Extension, and that's where we have a lot of our materials in our community development, community vitality team. Okay. And there's our affirmative action statement. And I'm going to talk about toss your hat in the ring. We've been doing this for several years now, and we started by a county-based educator probably in 2007 or 9 who was on our team, who has since retired. She put together a program locally for her areas that she was working in Pennsylvania on how to engage the community and the residents of Pennsylvania with their local government. And one of the things that was her impetus was how to get them to possibly run for local office. So our audience is the general public to attend this program. And I'm going to go into the details of the specific parts of this program. Our learning objectives for developing these workshops was to increase the citizens' understanding of and interest in Pennsylvania local government. Some of our areas of the state are getting people moving in from other states. And as we all know, local government, as I stress to people when I talk to them about local government, is a creature of the state. So every state is different on what type of local governments they've created. And for those that maybe didn't take civics in school and really don't know too much about local government, there's really a lot of misunderstandings about what they provide them as a citizen. We want to provide those that were considering running for local office a better understanding of the fundamentals of local government when entering public service. A lot of times when we do these workshops, people become interested in running local government because of some issue. And we try and stress to them in the workshops that just because you have a passion or an interest in one issue, that's not the sole things you're going to be working on as an elected official. There's other things you're going to have to deal with. Increase the number of candidates for unfilled offices in local government. A lot of times, especially in our smaller communities, there is not many people running. We've had instances where we've had not enough people serving on a board of elected officials at some of our local governments. And also then assist them increasing their success in filling out all the requirements. There's nomination petitions, campaign finance reports, and other required items. And so we created this workshop with the opportunity for our election office to come and share that information with those interested in running in the respect for local offices in their respective counties. And hopefully that cuts down some of the time they have to spend answering those questions on a daily basis of constituents interested in running for local office. So the basic components of the workshops are we do a short local government one-on-one, talk about the structure and the purpose of Pennsylvania local government. That's usually presented by a Penn State Extension educator. And there's only, the last time we did this in 2019, we had a few more educators doing these workshops. But in the past, there's been only a few of us doing these statewide. So many of us have done multiple toss your hats in the rings. Then we bring hopefully somebody in from the county elections office. That's not always the case. We've had some times where the county election office staff are not willing to do that, or they're not interested in doing that. Just depends on the relationship with the county commissioners or the county council. But in most cases, we really get the county elections people willing to do that. But in case they're not, then that information is presented by a Penn State Extension educator. We talk about the eligibility requirements, the nomination petitions, the financial reports, the rules and regulations for poll watchers and other individuals that might be working with that person who is looking to run for elected office. And then our final part of the workshop, which a lot of people find The most interesting part is hearing from those that were recently elected during the last local election cycle to come and talk about what they learned, why they ran, what they learned from running, what they learned getting elected, how it's more than just you're working as a team. You're not one individual, you'll be on a board with others. You have to work well with others. And as always, they always mention that they maybe had an interest that really perturbed them. And they said, well, I'd like to be elected to deal with this issue. And then always there's other issues they have to handle in their role as elected official. And those issues vary depending on the type of local government they were elected to. So this is what Pennsylvania local government looks like. Every square inch of Pennsylvania is in some incorporated area. Unlike some of the western and southern states that have unincorporated areas, where our government is incorporated. So if you're in the state, you're either in the county, and then below the county, there's other different units of local government. So that's one of the differences that sometimes people don't understand, and what these different local governments provide them in terms of services. So we try and address that in the workshop. This is Pennsylvania local government by the numbers. We have over 2,500 municipalities. I think we're only second to the state of Illinois. This could be a curse or it could be a blessing. For many people, you know your local elected officials, especially your township and borough officials. You might see them in the store. You might see them at church. They're part of the community you live in. So that's a good thing, where a lot of these decisions being made by local governments are in the hands of people that you know and that you can get involved with by attending their meetings and expressing yourself on the issues. 80% of them, though, are quite small, less than 5,000 population. So we have a lot of small municipalities, especially our boroughs. Many of our boroughs and rural townships are quite small. We do have one town, which is Bloomsburg. It was incorporated in the late 1800s as a town. Now you throw also then our school districts. We have 500 school districts throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. These school districts cross over county lines. So one of the school districts in the county I live is part of their student enrollments in another county adjacent to the county I live in. So we have a lot of local governments. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to get involved in local government. So we have about 30,000 elected officials running our local government, and these are just some of the examples. The school board directors, we have elected tax collectors, we have elected auditors, borough council, mayors, township supervisors or township commissioners. We have county commissioners or a county council, forms of government. So we have a lot of people in Pennsylvania overseeing local government. And as we tell people, local government is probably the government you're going to interact the most with on a daily basis, whether you have kids in school, whether you, in some cases, have trash pickup, whether you drive a lot of local streets, whether you want to get a zoning permit, building permit, those type of things. You're all going to deal with local governments in that regard. But local government is not always being an elected official somebody's fancy. So we do these workshops, and sometimes people don't run, but they get a better understanding of government. We have over 28,000 appointed officials throughout the Commonwealth. I serve as chair of my Township Planning Commission, Zoning Hearing Board, authorities, Water Sewer Board, Historic Districts, advisory boards, which could be for a short term or for an event, or it could be a long term. So if you don't feel comfortable in running for elected office, hopefully you can give back to the community. We encourage people to maybe see what type of appointed commissions that they can serve on at their local government level. So Toss Your Hat in the Ring was started in about 2007, 2009. We really went full force in 2011 with the whole team of extension educators at Penn State University. Municipal elections are held every 2 years in odd number of years here in Pennsylvania. And these are elections for local government. So our first workshop was held January, February 2011. One of the issues with this workshop, you have a short time frame. In Pennsylvania, if somebody wants to go on the ballot, there's about a 6-week window depending on the date of the primary of that year. that they have to get their petition circulated, signed, and filed at the county elections office. So we have a short window to do this, usually January, February, because our elections people, once the general election's over in November, they're busy doing things. And then after the holidays in the middle of January, they feel more comfortable, be able to assist us in doing these workshops because of all their other responsibilities. So we've done them over the years. And also in 2017, and we did it, no, 15 we started, we did one webinar and then 2 each in 17 and 19. Because of our limited number of educators throughout the state, we really have some pockets of the area where we don't really have anybody that would be able to present. So we offered webinars. Those are the state that people weren't going to be able to go to a face-to-face workshop. Over those cycles, we've done 51 workshops and 5 webinars. Unfortunately, several each time we try and attempt to do these workshops are canceled due to a lack of number of people. But we've had over 1,000 people in the workshops and webinars participate in the program. We've also involved people that have been elected, and it's amazing because I've done several of these over the cycles, and a lot of times those that attend a workshop and do get elected, I always reach out to them to serve on the panel that they can come back and share with those that are attending the workshop their experience of running for elected office. And so we've gotten those panels of those individuals. We try and always get a school board director. Anytime, in Pennsylvania, I know it's like in some of your states, but when you get your 2 tax bills every year, the largest one is our school tax. So we always try and get a school board director there because a lot of people, you know, they come and they complain to local government about taxes, specifically the school tax that they receive, usually in August every year. And we've also collaborated over the years with county election departments. I've had some county election heads I've reached out to, been very, very willing to participate. As I mentioned, they feel that they can reach a larger audience. Not to say that anybody who doesn't attend the webinar or the workshop, they will not be willing to speak to them if somebody reaches out to them about the petitions, the nomination petitions, the financial forms they need to fill out and so forth. So we've developed that relationship with some of these election officials over the years that are willing to participate and share the nuances of making sure that people can get their names on the ballots. Because one of the interesting things, there is a signature blocks needed for these petitions, and we always tell people to double the number of signatures, because if you're being challenged for an election, somebody's going to look at your signatures and try and see if they all are valid signatures for that nomination petition. So you want to make sure if some get thrown off, you still meet the minimum requirement for that elected office. So we've done some little summary surveys of these workshops. This is one from 1 year that we do. We do a survey the night of the workshop. We also do a long-term that I'll talk about in a minute, but we try and gauge the audience to see how much more confident were they in their abilities to run for office or seek appointed office. And so somewhat more confident through greatly more confident. There was a large percentage of those feeling more confident if they're going to decide to run for elected office. If they don't run for elected office, you know, we encourage them to maybe seek an appointed office to help their local government in some way. Then we also ask them about the different topics that were presented as part of the workshops. Well, let me mention this. The webinar, we don't have a panel at the webinar. That's a shortened time frame because you can't really do a virtual individuals. Maybe we can in the future, but the last couple of times we've done webinars, we don't have the panel. We just talk about the nuts and bolts and Pennsylvania local government. So you can see on this graph that we talk about local government, and they do learn information, what the roles and responsibilities of local elected appointed leaders. We really go over talking about if you're a county commissioner, what's your role in local government, if you're a township supervisor, borough council, so forth. The elected offices in your area, people are surprised, especially at the county level, whether some of the row officers, we call them, that get elected from district attorney to county treasurer to even county coroner, county auditors, and so forth. The mechanics of running for office, filing petitions, campaign finance, and you can see through each of this graph that there was an increase, or they felt that they gained knowledge to assist them. And then the last one we talk about are some of the characteristics of being an effective local government leader for the different elected offices. You know, time management, understanding that you're going to take time away from your family and from your work, being an elected official, even because you're not, a lot of them are not, you know, they're part-time, you don't get compensated normally other than county commissioners to be able to make it a living. But they need to know that they're going to have some time taken away from their life because all the issues are probably you're going to deal with as a local government official. Then we do a 6-month survey, or 4 or 6 months after the primary, before the November election, to see if they decided to run and which office they decide to run for. And this just shows that the largest percentage here is borough council, which are our little communities in Pennsylvania, and then some of the other offices are there as well. So a lot of them do decide to run, and a lot of them do become successful in getting through the primary. We've never done a general election survey to see whether if they survived the primary and if they were running in a contested election, whether they were successful in the general election for that elected office. We also asked them, how has your community involvement changed as a result of participating in these workshops? A lot of them, you know, maybe weren't familiar. They might have read about their local government, maybe attended a meeting or two. But I think what we encourage people, if they're even not going to consider running for office, to really get more engaged in their local government. So we do have this one shows about 14% attend more meetings of their local government or school districts. They pay more attention at 21% to news stories, which is always interesting, reading about what's taking place at local government meetings. Some have decided to serve on a board, a committee, or a commission, so they're getting involved in local government. Maybe 25%, they have a greater appreciation the challenges local government officials face. There are a lot of things that they deal with on a daily basis. And so you can see that they visit the websites more often. So we're getting them more engaged in their local government, which is really important here for Pennsylvania and other states, because that's where a lot of decisions are being made that impact our daily lives. I'd just like to finish that we also asked them, we have some open-ended questions. And so we've gotten a few quotes over the years, and these are just some of the ones that I picked out. Getting a better understanding of the demands of being a local government official, time commitment, responsibilities. There are many people are amazed of what responsibilities they will have. You know, one of the things we talk about is if you're an elected official, you're going to get involved in emergency management. If something happens in your community, you're the ones responsible to make sure that lives and the safety of your constituents are protected. Somebody used the general information provided to get a better understanding of the process. You know, it's important that if there are going to be considering running, that they do it correctly and not get their name thrown off the ballot due to not following the directions. And also how complicated or uncomplicated, depending on who you take, local government is structured here in Pennsylvania. Somebody did decide to run. They were very appreciative. It was a good primer on local government as a citizen. They weren't born and raised in Pennsylvania like where I live in northeastern Pennsylvania. We get people moving here from other states like New York and New Jersey, which have different types of local government. So I think that's my last slide, Eric. I'll stop sharing, and there's my contact information. If I can,
All right, thank you, Peter.
I'm trying to find my cursor. This happened. Oh, there we go. Found it.
Anyone with questions for Peter on Toss Your Hat in the Ring? Sounds like a really interesting program. Nancy says, do you have any recommendations for presenters aside from school board directors, elected officials, emergency management professionals?
Yeah, okay. Well, we try and focus in the workshops on the those that are elected office. One of the things is every 4 years in Pennsylvania is county elections. Well, county extension offices work with county commissioners. So we usually don't try and involve a panelist from a county commissioner because we don't want, I don't know if we want to be seen as encouraging people to run against elected county commissioners. That's always a tricky situation when they're a big funder of county extension offices. So we haven't really any recommendations for presenters other than the ones I mentioned about the elected county election office department heads who deal with this, as well as elected officials. So no, we haven't thought of that. It might be something we'll think about in the future. Somebody said, did you find any type of trend in who decided to attend? I don't know if we've got an answer to that. Trend, I really don't know. I mean, I interact with some of the people when they register, or if they attend, based on the questioning of those that attend the workshop. I know, sometimes people come because of this thing that they experience a certain issue, and they want to try and change a community, that issue. And as I mentioned, there's more than just one issue as your elected official. So I haven't found any trend who's decided to attend. It's probably people that, one, have interacted with local government in some fashion and want to learn more about what they do, what local government does, or they have an interest in running because they want to try and be elected and change situations or deal with that issue. But I don't have anything. And I can share the program, the curriculum. And somebody wanted to put my email in the chat. There we go.
Yeah, I was going to ask, have you noticed a change in participation? You mentioned the last 2 years you've done more of them as webinars than in person. Have you noticed a change in participation with the move to online?
I don't think the webinar delivery impacted the face-to-face. It's just that some people are not close to where a face-to-face. We have 67 counties in Pennsylvania, and we do these every year. We do probably 10 to 12. Sometimes we've done more, sometimes less, depending on the interest from counties. And there's few of us as educators statewide to do this. So I don't think the webinars are just a way to be able to deliver it to a person who is not in a close proximity to a face-to-face workshop. So there's really no. I mean, I've had some people sign up for webinars, and I told them, well, there's one in your county face-to-face. Some have decided to do that. Some have stuck to the webinar, but mostly it's people that live in the areas where there's no face-to-face workshops. So there hasn't been too much of an impact there.
I was just going to mention, we just wrote a curriculum like this last fall and piloted it. And it was very much local and in person. So it required the county educator to partner with their county clerk who runs our elections in order to do it, as well as the local party chairs. And one thing we had a few requests because we were piloting it, it wasn't in every county. And so we had a few requests for webinars, but I think one of the concerns is that we had in doing that, and I wonder if you face this as well, is that the thing that people reported that they enjoyed most was being able to connect with their local parties and local elected officials to be a part of that network, or to become a part of that network for the first time. So I just wondered, have you noticed that in the in-face versus webinar programs?
Yeah, I think the face-to-face, the biggest impact has been people hearing from those that are ran for local office and were elected to hear that experience and what they went through, and you don't get that on the webinar. So I think that's the benefit of doing it face-to-face. We see that a lot in our survey results. We do advertise it through the local media. We try and work with both the county Democratic and Republican committees to help us market it. We work with our county League of Women Voter chapters, if they have one, to help market it. I don't know if one way works better than another. I'm not sure. So, yeah, the one thing we don't talk about is campaigning. I know some of the legal and voter chapters in Pennsylvania do workshops like this, and we don't try and duplicate them or compete against them. And some of them talk about social media and campaigning. We don't address that in these workshops. This is just what is local government, what do you need to get on the ballot, and then people that have done it previously sharing their experiences.
Yeah, and I see a comment from Nancy on the struggle related to doing online and not having that in-person connection. Wondering maybe about a designated session or on networking or with breakout rooms, people can speak in smaller groups. And I know that's something we're looking at for some programs we're doing this fall with elected officials where they
Yeah. Well, next year is a local election year in Pennsylvania, so if we do it in 2021, hopefully we can do it face-to-face, but time will tell.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Peter. For everyone who wants to, from home, give your little round of applause. And that brings us to our last presenter for this session, Ramona Madison-Hector with Rethinking Community Development, a Grassroots Approach. And Ramona, if you want to go ahead and share your screen. All right, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Eric. So I am joined by Linda Seals, who is driving our Zoom presentation today. I am a regional specialized agent in urban sustainability for UF-IFAS Extension, and I'll let Linda introduce herself, then we'll move along.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Seals, regional specialized agent in community resource development on the East Coast of Florida. So what we're going to share with you today is a little background on this project. We're going to talk about our methods. How did we get it done, or how are we doing it? Results, how is it relevant to Extension? How is it relevant to you? And then the lessons that we've learned, which are many, and what's next. So a little bit of background. Some of you may be familiar with the Kettering Foundation and the National Issues Forum Institute and their Common Ground for Action. These are all organizations that have a democracy mission. The Kettering Foundation holds what's called a deliberative democracy exchange with numerous groups at various times throughout the year. And we are currently, Ramona and I are currently in the initiatives for democratic practices, creating spaces for deliberative public life, which is an 18-month training that includes a project, which is what we're talking about here today. And then the National Issues Forum Institute, under the umbrella of Kettering, they put together national issues guides or issue guides on a variety of different topics. And they also have what's called the Common Ground for Action. And that's where people come together to talk about issues and develop action items out of those conversations. And then ultimately, this is also a program with the University of Florida IFAS Extension called Civic, which you may have heard Ramona and I talk about before, Community Voices for Informed Choices. And what we do is we bring what the National Issues Forum develops and Kettering's research, we bring that to a local level with we use the national issue guides on a local level, and we develop our own issue guides also where there might be gaps with the National Issues Forum. And so the initiatives for democratic practices has really been an awesome experience because it's not just Extension who's involved. Actually, I think Ramona and I are the only Extension service involved. Everyone else involved, our cohorts, are from other universities, New Hampshire actually, community colleges, public libraries, nonprofit organizations. So we have a lot of diversity, not just in what we do, but in our geography and in our interest, our areas of expertise. And so that makes it really fun, and it makes it a great way to learn about other perspectives and to gain some experience from or learn from what these folks are doing. And then I guess probably the cherry on top of this is the Kettering researchers and National Issues Forum leaders that we get to learn from. And these folks are really experienced, and they've been doing this for many, many years. You see here on the right, the Ecology of Democracy book. This is the book written by David Matthews, who is the executive director of the Kettering Foundation. And if you haven't checked that book out, I encourage you to read it. It's, finding ways to have a stronger hand in shaping our future. It's all about getting folks involved in our democracy. And I think we're at a point in time in history where we need that more than ever. So it's a pretty exciting program to be a part of. And we'll let Ramona take over here.
Okay, so a little bit on our project location. We are in Pinellas County. Linda's on the East Coast, but I am on the West Coast. Pinellas County has 975,000. We have a lot of seasonal residents. We have spring breakers. We get a lot of snowbirders. They're here for 4 to 6 months of the year. We are bounded by the Gulf of Mexico on one side and Tampa Bay. And sustainability and resilience issues tend to be of prime importance in our region, especially given our coastal county. Our presenter before mentioned that there are 67 counties in Pennsylvania. It's the same thing here in the state of Florida. 35 of them are on the coast. So for us in Pinellas County, sustainability is a big deal. And Linda included our public deliberation and democracy. So we're really trying to look at how we can democratize, if you would, the discussions and dialogue around sustainability and resiliency. In our county, we have 25 local governments. There are 24 different municipalities plus the county, so that's 25. Makes it really interesting for intergovernmental work, but we tend to do a lot of good work together in our sustainability realm. And our project is focused specifically with the city of Clearwater, who in the last year had just hired a sustainability coordinator. So as we've moved into methods, this was really the impetus for us to really take the Kettering project when we were invited to participate and say, hey, where can we use this? And at the bottom of this slide, you see Clearwater Greenprint. This is the Clearwater map for how they had intended to approach sustainability issues within the community. It was funded through ARRA funds, American Recovery Funds. It was done many years ago. That was about 2010, 2011. They had hosted a couple of in-person sessions at community centers, but they'd never really done a deep dive. And when it came up at the city council for how were we measuring success, and at the time, the urban planner who worked on this couldn't really articulate what progress had been made. Certainly things had been done, but there had been no dedicated staff to actually make the progress on Greenprint. And when they hired a sustainability coordinator, it was like, bingo, we can actually do something. So we started with our Kettering project in July, November. We went to training in Ohio. We learned about concern collecting circles. We started with stakeholder interviews. These were things with us talking to the urban planner, talking to the sustainability coordinator, but also identifying community residents who we could invite to our conversations, which we did do in November and then earlier into this year. In November and December, which is our time frame, we worked on mapping the ecology of the community. This was a Kettering task. They wanted us to work and really figure out what does the community look like, who's involved, who's connected, who are we leaving out? And I think this is why Clearwater Greenprint and working with our sustainability person makes a difference, because we're really trying to be intentional. And I think we heard our plenary speaker talk about sustainability throughout, but how are we really doing it? Is it deliberate? Is it intentional? We were also supposed to work in frameworks and forums, and we'll share a couple of those on the next couple of slides. And now with the COVID crisis, our task for this quarter was supposed to be some more in-person conversations, which we've not been able to do, but we'll share how we will tackle that task moving forward. So here are the questions that we designed to create these issue guides. If you're familiar with NIFI, you would hear about issue guides, and Linda mentioned that earlier, and we'll connect it again later in our presentation. We were directed by Kettering, and they certainly helped us review it. This is not the first issue that they're working around with sustainability. They worked in Iowa on sustainability. So the questions that we were asking really connected to values, and this is something that Kettering does a lot. And we see this a lot in the urban planning profession as well. What do you value about the community? You know, what makes you feel part of this community? And then we try to break those down into, well, what do you think of when you hear sustainability? What do you think about when you hear present needs and future needs? And how can the city actually move that forward? In the chat box, we would love if you can tell us whether or not you've been thinking more about your resource use as you've been home during the pandemic, and you have more folks at home, you have your teenagers at home, homeschooling, husbands and wives working from home. So have you been thinking about resource use during the pandemic? And maybe has this given you a little bit more insight into sustainability? Next slide. So here are some of the things we are hearing from the folks who come to the concern circles. So remember, these were done in November and then January, February. So on this slide, just a couple of different comments here that you can read, but I'm also going to add a little bit more. One of the things we heard from folks here is that the word sustainability, it's off-putting to people in underserved communities. I think we heard our plenary speaker mention today that it isn't just about the environment, and sometimes people think it is about the environment. It's so much more. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. One of our attendees actually said that, it took for somebody to come along in the community to say to her, they think that we don't care. And if we don't care and we don't show up at meetings, then we're not getting our voices heard. So voices heard and community connections were really a driver for getting people to come into the community and to continue work in sustainability. Next slide. So this is our ecology map. It was interesting when we presented these at Kettering because we weren't given any guide and everybody's ecology map looked completely different. So our external partners are in those orange boxes. City of Clearwater, again, most of you might have seen the Clearwater Beach on the news because of the spring breakers, but we have a lot of interest in coastal issues in that particular community and a lot of ocean businesses. So Ocean Allies and Sierra Club have been a really integral part of what they're doing in the community to connect and work with businesses and restaurateurs as it relates to plastic. And I saw Holly put into the chat box that she's been thinking about electricity use, and Kristen mentioned recycling. So all of those issues connect with our external partners. The sustainability coordinators are part of a statewide network, so they're discussing these issues again. The blue elements are all City of Clearwater players, the businesses, the residents, the YMCA centers, community centers. There are lots of community centers within the city, and as usual, we tend to host programs there, but are we really getting at the desired target audience when we're thinking about green prints and getting that community involvement and that intentional community involvement to really reflect a plan that is everybody's, that everybody can lay claim to. Next slide. Linda, do you want to handle this one?
Yeah, sure do. My mouse wouldn't move. So naming and framing, Ramona alluded to this earlier. So the NIFI naming and framing system is based on community values. So during the concern collecting, we are collecting the values that are expressed in the answers to the questions that we ask. So sometimes you have to do a little bit of digging to get at what those values are because they aren't always expressed clearly. And so sometimes you have to dig around. So the naming and framing issues, first we get at those values, and from those values, 3 options are developed. And usually it's 3, sometimes it's 4, but most often it's going to be 3 options. Each option is a collection of values expressed, or individual values, community values expressed during those concern collecting. And then within each option is 3 are action items. The action items are listed, and with each action item, there is a trade-off or a consequence. If we do this, then this will happen. And that's a real important part of the process, but it's also a very challenging part of the process to develop. So, when it comes down to naming and framing, COVID-19 has negatively impeded our progress towards developing our issue guide because obviously we're not able to meet face-to-face. We're not able to build those relationships and hold those concern collecting circles like we might do if we could meet face-to-face. And we're wondering, are the answers to our concern collecting questions going to change because of COVID-19? Are people's values, have they adjusted a little bit, or have different values risen to the surface? And are we going to get different questions that we may have asked maybe a few months ago? Is our original plan still valid? Is the green print still the top priority for the City of Clearwater? Are stakeholders really thinking about that? And are our participants thinking about that? I would venture to say that today, the participants that we're searching for in this project are not thinking about those things today. Everything's changed. And have values been affected by the pandemic? I already kind of alluded to that, but I think that we're probably going to find not just by the pandemic, but probably by the issues that we've seen this weekend and late last week. I think we're probably going to find that those values have been affected by all of those current events. And so some of the lessons that we've learned and the challenges that we've faced, obviously the pandemic has presented some major challenges, just in terms of developing those relationships. And that's one of the keys to this process, is developing relationships with people so that you can really get at those values. But rethinking our meetings and our forums, we're really having to step back and think, can we have community conversations? Can we do deliberative forums? Can we do those things virtually? And I think we're finding out that we can, but just the process might be a little bit different, and we just have to be more mindful of people interacting and feeling like they're in a safe place where they can express themselves. That loss of direct relationships, the virtual platform limits the access with groups. Some groups are not going to have as easy access to the technology as maybe other groups, so that's going to present a challenge for us. Requires greater management. If you've done any webinars or any teaching, any forums, anything like that via the virtual format, that it takes a lot more people to pull that off, because you need people who are driving the PowerPoint, and you need someone to be, managing the logistics of the Zoom itself. So that requires greater management, and we have to be very intentional in our approach. We have to be very intentional when we're actually holding the forum. And is it still possible with some adjustments? Can we pull all this off and make the necessary adjustments while still reaching our goal?
So one of the things we often hear in Extension is, what is the value to us? Can we replicate this program in Extension? Is there value for us around the nation? I think today from Optenary, we get the sense that there is value for us to look at how we can contribute to planning and development on our urban communities as much as our rural communities. We talk a lot in community resource development here and urban extension in Florida about the urban-rural continuum. So as a result of us working with Kettering, we are bringing value and relevance to our sustainability network here in Pinellas County, as much as in Brevard County, which is where Linda is, and across the state. So we're able to replicate, amplify, and magnify this issue, if you would, across the state. We're able to also work with new partners in the community. We've done some one-off programs with our Hispanic Outreach Center and our Intercultural Advocacy Center, but I can tell you personally that we've never really targeted our NAACP, and that's one of the groups that we want to get to. That's one of the groups we've reached out to many times, but our aligning in terms of timing doesn't work. So the sustainability coordinator knows that this is something she wants to get in terms of perspective. So we're diligent and intentional about getting that. One of the challenges with these processes, but I think in terms of value, is that it's long-term. This is not going to be seen in 2 days or 3 months. This is a long-term process to get real community development, real values expressed. And as Linda mentioned, it could totally turn on its head. It could be not even what we thought we were going to get out of this completely at the beginning. But I think that goes to program development and relevance for extension. We localize something, we respond to the issues within our community, and through that we can work on our vitality. We're learning new tools. We've not practiced online forums with anybody in our state yet. I've participated in a few of them, but we've not done it. So looking at the tools that we might have to use in order to reach those communities is going to be important. And in the development of the issue guide, we are looking at pros and cons. So we're really getting a dialogue, and I think that's one of the challenges with a process like this in terms of the long-term success. I think we're almost at the end, so it's an opportunity for you guys to begin thinking about questions you want to ask us, either in the chat box or directly when you have a chance to unmute yourself. We mentioned that we want to hold virtual forums. We will work in an issue guide. We're responding to COVID-19 where possible. Our goal is to report to the city, the community, and to the Kettering Foundation. The community always has people coming to them. This is something we heard from our participants in the circle. You want us to get our input, but then we don't see any action moving forward. So they also want to be able to hear what's going to happen and what's going to come out of the process. So that's important to them. Yep, thank you. I know that was pretty quick, but I think we have enough time for some questions and can still be out by 2 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ramona and Linda. And yeah, anyone questions? A comment from Nozella. This is wonderful for Extension to be present and facilitating these dialogues, especially during this time that tensions are increasing. Yes, absolutely.
That's a great point, Nazala. And I think one of the challenges as we were talking with Ellie about fiscal budgets and then coming through with our presenter before, sustainability is considered discretionary funding. It's one of the first things to be cut or reduced in any county's budget. But when you look at the totality of what it can impact in terms of building healthy, equitable communities, that's where we lose out when we lose that funding.
Anyone else with questions? Feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourself and you can ask them yourselves. Well, I'll give another minute in case anyone's typing one in, but in the meantime, I just want to again say thank you to all of our wonderful presenters today. These are being recorded, and the presentations will be posted on the website. And coming up at 2, we do have a kind of social break from 2 to 2:30 before our NACDEP business meeting at 2:30. See a couple comments. Nancy, I wonder how sustainability policy could affect how it's placed during budget discussions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Nancy, because it's something that's definitely been coming up as we go into hurricane season here in Florida. So that's another challenge for us in terms of how do we engage with the communities that are likely to be most impacted, and especially during a time of COVID and social distancing when we're faced with these challenges. So I think it's great. And I think what we saw with the position in Clearwater was that there wasn't really a dedicated support person for sustainability, so they couldn't make the progress they had hoped for. But by placing her within the city in terms of the city office or within the planning department, which is typically where you find these types of things, she was actually a point person that they can go to now and say, hey, this is something that we can see happening. Before, sustainability is just added. It's an afterthought that tends to be added unless you create that. So you're right, depending on how it's funded and depending on how it is presented in budgets is going to impact how much money it's going to get and what success it might have. Yes, very good comment, Nancy. That's our goal. That's always our goal. At least that's my goal personally, so thank you.
All right, well, thank you everybody. And with that, we'll bring this session to an end.
Thank you, everybody.